Now for a story that we should all be aware of, and it's happening to Julian Assange and the possibility of him being removed from the Ecuadorian embassy. So, Paul, what the hell is going on, man?
Right, so a little bit of recap in history, right? Julian Assange failed to appear in court 6-7 years ago in a case involving allegations of sexual assault that weren't brought against him by the supposed victim, but they were brought against him by the state. He felt that this was a pretext not to arrest him or prosecute him for an alleged sexual assault, but rather a pretext to get him extradited to the United States because the United States was mad at him for disclosures about U.S. war crimes during the Bush administration. The sexual assault case was dropped because, again, the person who was alleged to be the victim had to come out and say, no, I wasn't raped. I'm not bringing these charges. These charges are being brought disingenuously by the state. In that time, he was granted asylum and actually, I think, citizenship by the country of Ecuador. So he had fled to London and found himself in exile in the Ecuadorian embassy. And then everyone's been saying, well, he can leave at any time. The rape charges have been dropped. It's like, right, but the UK has an extradition treaty with the United States. If he sets foot outside of that embassy, the UK will arrest him for failing to appear in court in a case that has already been dropped and use that as a pretext to extradite him to the United States, where we now know there have been charges written up against Julian Assange. A couple of weeks ago, Chelsea Manning had a grand jury indictment against, so that she should testify against Julian Assange, which she refused to, which she ended up in solitary confinement for 28 days. She's now out of solitary confinement. It's not called solitary confinement. They call it something else when it's related to a grand jury. She's back in the regular prison population. But the new news is that Ecuador is prepared at any moment to rescind their asylum of Julian Assange and allow the UK to arrest him and therefore extradite him to the United States. The WikiLeaks posted this. They said corruption investigation opened against Ecuador's President Moreno after purported leaked contents of his iPhone and WhatsApp and Telegram and Gmail were published. The New York Times reported that Moreno tried to sell Assange to the US for debt relief. The country of Ecuador is now saying that because WikiLeaks released this information that had previously been released by the New York Times, that therefore Julian Assange is in violation of his asylum agreement for not investigating Ecuador. So therefore they're going to rescind his asylum, despite the fact that the New York Times previously published this, and it appears that Ecuador is actively seeking a way out of giving him asylum. So this is something that we should all be really, really focused on, because whatever you think about Julian Assange, whether you think, you know, he's a slimy, disgusting man who probably did commit those sexual, assault charges, despite the fact that the purported victim has said that he didn't. If you think that, oh, he's been holed up in this embassy for so long, he probably smells bad. Doesn't matter what you think about him. You are allowed as a journalist to publish true information, regardless of where it came from. That's allowed. If this prosecution is allowed to go forward, it will affect every journalistic outlet on the planet.
Both conservative, liberal, socialist, independent, everyone could be affected by this.
Exactly. It sets the precedent that if you publish a thing that is found out to have been obtained illicitly, whether you were the person who illegally obtained it or not, right now it's illegal. Right now you could be prosecuted if you are the person who stole it. But if it's given to you by someone who stole it, and it's true and newsworthy, you're allowed to publish it. The people that are actually coming out against this are people like Bloomberg. Bloomberg has raised the alarm about how bad this could be. The New York Times has raised the alarm about how bad this could be. If you saw the movie The Post, that's exactly what this is. But what I see is, and Caitlin Johnstone did a great job about this, no matter how you feel about Julian Assange, no matter if you don't like him, if you think he's politically motivated, you cannot dispute the fact that he published true information and was not the person who stole that true information. Therefore, he is acting in a journalistic capacity, and therefore, trying to prosecute him under the Espionage Act is an assault on the free press. This is something we need to keep a very close eye on.
In the comment sections, and I kind of want to open this table up to discussion. I want to get Paul and Daniel and myself of what can be done. But Anad Shidar asks, but what can be even done about this? What can we do to really help out Assange, and how can we hold true to the fact that this guy is right now under threat, and if something happens to him, this really impacts independent media as a whole. I mean,
it doesn't even affect independent media; it affects media.
All media.
All media. Yeah, right. Sorry,
I think that part of the reason that we have Bloomberg and others worried about that this would happen under a Trump precedent. Yeah. So if Assange can have that happen to him and Trump can do that, they're going to be worried that he's going to then, because they know how precedent works, they're very worried that he will then do the same. So if, I don't know, someone leaks information to journalists about some illicit acts that Trump has taken, well, now we know from that precedent that they could be arrested, and they don't want to be arrested. They see the writing on the wall. It's interesting how when Hillary was coming up, they had a slightly different tune on how all this was going to play out. But now that they are personally in that precedent, in that sphere that comes out of it, they care.
Yeah. You know, looking at this, after so many years, what we need to remember as citizens is that we need to have a free and fair media. And all of the media, from the establishment to the independent, no matter how you align politically, we all have to be concerned about the treatment of Julian Assange. If we don't step up and call for his protection, everyone is going to lose something, and we're going to lose our freedoms. And look, you could hate the man as much as you want. He has critics on the Democratic side, the Republican side, in the middle, but we can't afford to have him be prosecuted.
Go ahead. Another question: How does the U.S. have whistleblower protections? Yeah, we do.
Well, we did technically.
Well, we do, but they've been so watered down that it's in name only. In reality, what is happening? This is a power dynamic system at play. You have journalists who are able to critique, as the fourth estate, critique the government and say they're not doing this right, release documents, Pentagon Papers, things of that nature, and that's what they're there for. But then you have people in power who don't want that information released. Mm-hmm. And whistleblower acts are meant to say, as the government, it's so important to the population and the well-being of the country that this stuff is safe to be released. If there's wrongdoing, you got to do something about it, you got to show it. But then they started going on the line of, but before you release it, you have to ask permission from your boss. Right. And then you have to go through this process. And if you don't go through this process and cross every I and dot every T, well, then you didn't go through it properly. And if you release it, then you're committing a crime. And then they'll do it even further and say, well, this information you just can't release. Doesn't matter if it's whistleblower, doesn't matter if something's right or wrong with it. You just can't release it. And so they keep slowly undermining whistleblower laws until they're not really that relevant.
Our whistleblower protections are laughably inadequate. I mean, Chelsea Manning's a good example. What we learned from Chelsea Manning's disclosures were acts of breaches of international law, international criminal law that the United States made, that Chelsea Manning made us aware of. She ended up in prison, had to have her sentence commuted by Obama, which was largely for political reasons, I think. I don't think he really wanted to do that. And she finds herself back in prison now for refusing to testify to a grand jury about Assange, who they are just chomping at the bit to put in prison. And I actually had to do a little research on this. Somebody had mentioned there are only 2 countries in the world that have a grand jury, and someone pressed me on, well, what is the other country that has a grand jury? It's Liberia. Liberia is the only other country in the world that has a grand jury process because of how nefarious it is, and the fact that
you can indict a ham sandwich to a grand jury.
Well, its purported reason for being is to protect the person they're questioning, and it repeatedly only ever gets used to persecute the person that they're questioning. Wow. which is
all the grand jury really is You go to some people that you just pick off, basically just randomly pick through, and then you have obviously whittle them down with your own prosecutors getting to determine who actually sits there, and then you say to them, "Hey, here's some evidence we have. Should we do charges?"
You know, there's one final note I want to add to the story. You know, a lot of the whistleblower protections were actually removed under one administration, the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's not also forget that he did get rid of habeas corpus too. So, you know, why don't we all just think about that? Look, we could be critical of Trump and be threatened by him, and of course we should be concerned of how his administration is going to handle Julian Assange.
He's just using the precedent that exists.
Yeah, just remember who gave him that open pathway. Barack Obama, the Democrat.
One other thought I want to add. Okay, just want to reiterate, regardless of how you feel about Julian Assange, this extradition of Julian Assange, or attempted extradition of Julian Assange, first of all, likely will happen any day now. Second, it has nothing to do with Russia and the 2016 election. It's obvious, it's clear, it is in writing that it has everything to do with the disclosures that happened during the Bush administration about the United States' malfeasance in wartime. And again, regardless of what you feel about Assange, if you care about press freedoms, you should support Julian Assange and demand that the United States back down from these charges.
To give a metaphor, the reason we have freedom of speech isn't because we don't want people saying that trees are cool and dogs or puppies are cute. That's not what freedom of the press is there for. Freedom of speech.
Same thing.
Freedom of the press really is there for. It's there for when things are confusing and on the borderline. Because if you can't protect the borderline and that falls, then there's a new borderline. Then if you take that out, then there's a new borderline. If you take that out, and you have this continual runaway. So if you don't protect these freedoms when they're difficult, the stuff that is easy will become difficult in the future. And then you have thought crimes. Then you have basically what you got in the Soviet Union, where saying something to someone is grounds to get you killed.
Absolutely. Hey, did you like that video? Well, guess what? You could subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that ring bell notification, and that way you get updated when we upload content to our YouTube channel. And if you really like what we do, please check out our website, hardlensmedia.com. There you can find our other social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreaker. And if you really want to support independent media, we have a Patreon page.